Hello, and welcome to the latest episode of this podcast series where I share a favorite poem every day. The poem I'm going to read today is by the well known American poet William Matthews, and the poem is called No Return. No Return by William Matthews. I like divorce. I love to compose letters of resignation. Now and then I send one in and leave in a lemon hued huff or a snit with four on the floor. Do you like the scent of a hollyhock? To each his own. I love a burning bridge. I like to watch the small boat go over the falls. It swirls in a circle like a dog coiling for sleep, and its frail bow pokes blindly out over the false lip. A little and a little more, and then too much. And then the boat's nose dives and butt flips up so that the boat points doomily down, and the screams of the soon to be dead last longer by echo than the screamers do. Let's go to the videotape, the newscaster intones, and the control room does, and the boat explodes again and again. In How to Read a Poem by Terry Eagleton, the famous literary critic, he has actually included a limerick, and we don't know the name of the poet. He has not mentioned it, so I'll read the limerick and to give you a little bit perspective of what I'm trying to get at. Limerick from How to Read a Poem, Terry Eagleton's book. There was a young poet of Japan whose verses never would scan. When they asked him why, he said, "It's 'cause I just can't help getting as many words into the last line as I possibly can." So if you see, the last line is so much longer, and this is something that poets do. To break the rhythm of the rest of the poem, to signify that the poem has ended, the last line would have a different rhythm. It would last longer than the rest of the poem. This is something that poets do all the time. But this is a literary device where you employ more words than normal to end a poem. But it is done to a greater effect when the ending itself signifies infinity. For example, Robert Frost's famous poem where he ends, "And miles to go before I sleep, and miles to go before I sleep." Just repeating these lines signifies eternity. Second sleep is beyond sleep. It is something much larger, death probably, or probably even beyond death. Or how 1001 Arabian Nights, that 1001, that adding 1 to 1000 itself signifies it makes a huge difference. It signifies eternity. So that is something poets and writers, people who are wordsmiths, are understand. Now this is something that here in William Matthews' poem, it's a dark satirical piece. It's a very dark poem. I like divorce. I love to compose letters of resignation. But to each his own. A Marxist line he just uses. I love a burning bridge. I like to watch the small boat go over the falls. It's so, look at the imagery and how it's compared, like so beautiful. It swirls in a circle like a dog coiling for sleep, and its frail bow pokes blindly out over the false lip. A little falls lip. You can literally visualize that the falls has a lip over which the boat just goes down. A little and a little more, and then too much. So that kind of shows how the boat would have gone. Just like the poem in one of the previous podcast episodes where basic physics, the cartoon physics part 1, where you don't realize that you've fallen from a cliff unless you look down and then you start falling. So it kind of slows down that fall itself. A little and a little more, and then too much, and then the boat just goes. Boat nose dives and butt flips up so that the boat points doomily. See how both the fall, the waterfall, and the both are personified. The waterfall has a lip, and the boat dive, both nose dives. So both of them get personified so beautifully in these three lines. And then by the time we come to the end of the poem, we realize that all of this was like shown on a television. Let's go to the videotape. The newscaster intones, and the control room does, and the boat explodes again and again. To create that effect of infinity, he does not use too many words. He just leaves that space, the where we would be with the poet, probably in an open fall, then suddenly it becomes a box, a television, and the videotape is rotated again and again. So that actually shows how much he likes chaos. The poet's fascination towards chaos is exemplified. It gets infinitely more interesting, as he says that he likes to watch the boat explode again and again. So this is something that is very similar to extending the line beyond a given length, but not by doing it just using a literary device, but something more psychological, something more emotional. That is what he achieves in this poem, and that's why I really like this poem. There's another poem by David Vaughan, another American poet, where something similar is achieved. And I'd like to read this poem because again this is a very fascinating piece. Poems with unique things to say, written in simple language, fascinate me, and I like to bring them to you. So this poem is called "The Assassination of John Lennon as Depicted by Madame Tussauds Wax Museum, Niagara Falls, Ontario, 1987." The assassination, the name of the poem itself is so long. The assassination of John Lennon as depicted by the Madame Tussauds Wax Museum, Niagara Falls, Ontario, 1987. Here again a false comes up, coincidentally. David Vaughan's poem. Smuggled human hair from Mexico falls radiant around the waxy O of her scream. Shades on, leather coat and pants, Yoko on her knees, like the famous Kent State photo, where the girl can't shriek her boyfriend alive, her arms windmilling Ohio sky. A pump in John's chest heaves, to Mimi death throes. The blood is made of latex, his glasses broken on the plastic sidewalk. A squalling David Chapman, his arms outstretched, his pistol barrel spiraling fake smoke. In a siren's red wash completes the composition, and somewhere background music plays Imagine. Before the tableau darkens, we push a button to renew the scream. The chest starts up again. Of course, you could visualize the poetic devices that are here. Mexico rhymed with waxy O. We would be imagining that waxy O is the face, is the wax model. The O is the head of Lennon. But then it becomes off her scream. There's an enjambment here. There's stanza break. Falls radiant around the waxy O of her scream. So we realize this is not actually Lennon who is being spoken about. It is Yoko Ono, and all the more effect is created by the Mexico used in the first stanza itself. Shades on, leather coat and pants, Yoko on her knees. Yoko on her knees, O-N, there is no Ono here, Yoko on her knees. So the wordplay that is there in the poem is fascinating, like the famous Kent State photo, where the girl can stretch her boyfriend alive, her arms windmilling Ohio sky. Windmilling is such a powerful verb to be used here. It almost reminds us of Don Quixote fighting a windmill, the windmill personified. Here her arms windmilling is like it's such a powerful verb. A pump in John's chest heaves, to Mimi death throes. The blood is made of latex. It's such a funny line, and such a dark line. His glasses broken up on the plastic sidewalk. And then the murderer, David Chapman, his arms outstretched, his pistol barrel spiraling fake smoke. Again, just like the blood is latex, the smoke is also fake. And then in a siren's red wash completes the composition, and somewhere background music plays Imagine. Imagine, the poet is also asking us to imagine, and at the same time John Lennon's famous song is also recalled, and what John kind of that remains the anthem of John Lennon, right? Or the ideology that even the entire Beatles or the 60s, the entire counterculture movement stood for. And then almost towards the end, where we are almost convinced that this is making fun of the whole thing, he says, before the tableau darkens, we push a button to renew the scream, the chest starts up again. So not only does this signify that the whole khela, the whole fun bit starts up again, it also shows that it definitely gives us a sense of infinity, like the last poem where the boat falls again, explodes again and again here this poem also ends with the word again, so the chest starts up again. But more importantly, this signifies that John Lennon is the kind of people John Lennon and the likes of people they will never die. The kind of person John Lennon is, he continues to live even in a wax model in Madame Tussauds Museum, in this whole drama that unfolds. The chest starts up again. He continues to live. He continues to his chest continues to throb. That is what makes this poem so. The meta reading of it is so powerful. So yeah, the writing poem, we can, as young poets, can learn from this, that ending a poem, Aristotle says this beautifully. He defines beginning and end in his Poetics, which is actually a book on drama, not poetry. But he says beginning is something before which nothing exists, and end is something after which nothing exists. So beginning should not be like that in a drama we know where the drama has begun, and we know where the drama has ended. This is something that the audience knows when he sees it, when he is a part of it. And in poetry, we should attempt to write endings in the same way a dramatist writes endings for a play, or after which nothing else exists. And what is a better way to make it an infinite kind of an ending, where the poet itself proclaims that this is, which is stretched to infinity. This goes on and on and on and on in a cyclic pattern. And this is something that both these poems achieve to perfection. That's why I think William Matthews' No Return and David Wojan's The Assassination of John Lennon, as depicted by the Madame Tussauds Wax Museum, Niagara Falls, Ontario, 1987, are really amazing poems to read. And do share if you want to, if there are some other poems which have these kind of endings you would like to share, and we can discuss them in the comment section. Thank you so much for being a part of this discussion. We'll meet again tomorrow with a new poem and a new poet. Thank you so much.